Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Um, so I am going to talk a little bit about my Etsy shop and pattern making and how this all came to be. Here I have a link to my Etsy shop and also my Instagram. I have a promo code for eSalon for 45% off, which I will also talk about. I'll share again at the end of the presentation for anyone who may have missed it. And I will go ahead and get started. So first, I wanted to talk about uh, a little bit about my background. I'm Gabby Rios. I am the senior graphic designer and packaging designer at eSalon. I'm going to share a bit about what I do outside of work, which is pattern design. I started doing pattern design at the beginning of 2024 and transitioned that into selling on Etsy. So I'm originally from San Diego. I moved to LA for art school. I went to Otis College of Art and Design and majored in graphic design. After graduating, I stayed in LA and built my career as a designer. At the beginning of 2024, I took a surface pattern design course called Immersion. And that was a pretty intensive boot camp about pattern design. After that, I started my small business, Gabby Rios Design, and opened an Etsy shop about a year ago. So before diving into pattern making and the shop, I wanted to talk about my overall why I wanted to do all of this. This is the reason behind starting the business, and it's something I come back to frequently if I'm getting overwhelmed. So in art school, you learn to create as much as possible in as little time as possible, which is great working purposes, working in the real world, but it's very creatively exhausting. This photo here is my roommate and I at the end of our senior year of art school, just totally exhausted. And I think it really captures the feeling of creative burnout. So for many years after school, I was really focused on building my career, and I was only making art and being creative for work. And then at the start of 2024, I made it my New Year's resolution to create art for myself again. This is generally what it looks like when I'm painting with my cat Fox. He has to be involved with everything. So when it comes to pattern making, this is generally the steps that I go through uh, whenever I'm making each of my pattern. So step one, I start with the ideation process, brainstorming, creating word lists, deciding with the tone and style of the pattern or pattern collection that I'm making, what I want it to feel and look like. I then do some rough sketching, do some thumbnails, decide what I want the overall collection to look like, move into creating, which I will dive deeper into on the next slide. Once I have all my shapes and motifs, I bring them into Adobe Illustrator where I refine them and clean them up. I then build the pattern and experiment with color and scale in Adobe Illustrator. So Adobe Illustrator is really the main program that I'm using for building and creating my patterns. So creating. The first method I use is India ink on watercolor paper. I usually use this technique for creating things that I want to look really organic and hand painted. So all of my patterns are done in Adobe Illustrator, which is is vector based. So it'll start to look really clean and precise very quickly. So if I still want that organic tactile feeling, I will use India ink. Now I do that a lot for like florals, leaves, anything that is very organic. And the second method is creating on my iPad using the Procreate app. I like this because it's precise, quick, and it's very easily editable. And I use this a lot for any artwork that I want detail work on. So a lot of the like cats, dogs, any animals, anything I want to look really recognizable really quickly, I will use uh, my iPad. So this is a pattern from start to finish. Gingham pattern is also known as a picnic blanket pattern. And I was able to skip the ideation portion because it's pretty straightforward. Everyone really knows what the, picnic pattern looks like. But for this pattern, for my gingham pattern, I wanted it to look really organic. And a lot of gingham patterns you see are very geometric and very rigid. I wanted it to still feel like it was hand done, like there's some painted element into it. So I started off by doing some painting with India ink on watercolor paper, brought that into Illustrator and refined and later on made colors. And this is the final pattern on the right.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah, of course.
How do you get the image from the watercolor paint into Illustrator? Do you take a picture and upload it, or how does that work?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways. I usually will take a photo or take a scan, like on the iPhone in the notes section, you can scan stuff. So I'll usually scan that, bring that image into Illustrator, and then you can use the image trace feature in Illustrator. And because it's India ink and it's so dark, it translates pretty quickly, and it's a pretty easy transition. So yeah, good question. Um, Alrighty, I will go to the next slide. Okay, so for pattern collections, many pattern designers work in collections as a way to create a cohesive family of patterns to pitch all together versus creating one-off patterns and kind of trying to sell them one at a time. So pattern collections are usually between 6 to 8 to 12 different patterns in one collection. I usually keep mine on the smaller side just because that's a lot. 12 patterns is quite a lot for one collection. So pattern collections have three different types of patterns in them. They have hero patterns, coordinate patterns, and blender patterns. The most detailed patterns in a collection that really set the stage and tell the story of the entire collection are the hero patterns. So you can look at these patterns and know exactly what this whole collection is going to be about. And then usually I will take elements from the hero patterns and bring them into the coordinate and blender patterns. So the coordinate patterns support the hero and overall theme of the collection, usually have a medium amount of detail and bring balance. And then blender patterns are the least detailed and unify the collection by providing visual rest and ensure the collection doesn't become overwhelming. So these a lot of the time will be like stripes, dots, really simple patterns that are kind of a break for the eye when all the other patterns are a lot more complicated. So this was my very first pattern that I created at the beginning of 2024 during the immersion course that I took. It is called Oliver and Wednesday, and it is dedicated to my parents, Dachshund, and my first cat, Wednesday. They both passed away at the beginning of 2024, pretty close together. And since I was in the middle of exploring pattern design, I decided that I wanted my first pattern to be dedicated towards them. So actually my favorite pattern of all time that I've created is this heart pattern down here in the bottom middle because I used some of Wednesday's fallen whiskers and I dipped them in India ink to create the hearts there. So that one is very special to me. It's looks very simple, but it has a lot of meaning behind it, which I think is one of the really fun parts about pattern design. Even the most simple patterns can have a really deep impact. And this pattern, this cat pattern that I created, which is dedicated to Wednesday, was actually one of the ones that helped me jumpstart my Etsy shop because I was able to rework these into different types of cats, different cat breeds and cat coat colors. And this is something that I feature heavily in my Etsy shop. So I'll talk a little bit about the Etsy shop now. These are some of the best sellers. So my cat pattern, the dachshund pattern. I've done some other dog breeds as well. And the top row is some of my customer photos that are my absolute favorite. I love it when people send me photos of their animals with the products that they purchase. I think it's so adorable. And then I also I just started doing custom pet portraits. So this is actually Kalila's cat down at the very bottom, Kiki. I think it's the perfect Halloween representation of my newest product, the custom pet portraits. So those are so fun. I love doing. So why Etsy? I wanted to talk a little bit about why I chose Etsy to feature my artwork. Um, I've shopped on Etsy for a really long time. I absolutely love shopping on Etsy. There's a million amazing artists on there that are all selling their amazing creations. And for a long time, I knew I wanted to have an Etsy shop. I just didn't know what I was going to have on there, what I was going to feature. So once I started doing pattern design, it made sense. It was a pretty easy transition to be able to put some of the patterns on Etsy and have customizable products that are really giftable. Gift giving is one of my love languages. And so I thought for this shop, it'd be great to feature items that are really giftable. So Etsy itself is made for artists and they're very supportive of artists. They're always featuring artists on their shop and in their ads. Um, it has a built-in customer base, a huge built-in customer base, which is a great way to get started. Very low startup costs, provides a lot of tools and resources for sellers, handles payments and sales tax, drives traffic, and it's a search engine. So you can get on to Etsy with minimal knowledge, and then you're having people driven to you. So it kind of takes a lot of the work out of that side of selling. Some of the cons, it does have a high competition, but if you're doing your unique art, I don't think that really matters all that much. You know, if you're an artist that has something unique to share with the world, then people will find that and like it or not, and then they can go on to a different artist. So um people talk a lot about the high competition on Etsy, and it is highly saturated, but it also depends on what you're there for. The fees can add up. There are fees associated with selling on Etsy. They're not as high as a lot of other sites. So I feel like with Etsy, it's worth it because so much traffic is being driven from Etsy itself that they take a percentage. Makes sense. And then there's risk of suspension. It is possible um, to have your shop suspended or just kind of like shut down. It usually if you're following all the rules and you don't have anything on there that's, inappropriate, I've never had an issue, so I think it just depends on each seller. And that's the end of my presentation. I have my Instagram linked here, the Etsy shop. I also have a newsletter that I send monthly shop updates, and I'm going to be sending out some like gift guides and any new products that I have on my shop. I send out newsletters. I try to do two a month. Kind of depends how busy I am, but yeah, I really appreciate you guys listening to my presentation. And I also have a promo code for eSalon, eSalon 45 for 45% off anything in the shop. And if you follow me on Instagram, I might be doing a giveaway soon for the holidays to figure that out. But that is something I want to do. Well, thank you.